Retro Quickies, 1942. Long before first-person shooters were a thing, games were already taking advantage of alleged nostalgia for massive world-shattering catastrophes and setting their games in a time of grand-scale human suffering and paranoia. But hey, who cares about that, right? It still feels good to play as a single plane taking down swarms of enemy flyers all on your own. This is about as standard a vertical scrolling shooter as you can get, and it manages to stay out of the bullet hell category and remains a fairly fair shooter all throughout. The difficulty does ramp up, and there are times when the amount of stuff on screen can get to the point where your NES will start crying for a break, but compared to other games in the genre, this one is more like a set of training wheels, giving you not only 3 lives, but also unlimited amounts of continues. But given the way that both work, the only big difference is that continuing wipes your score. The game is also surprisingly generous when it comes to checkpoints, so you're never sent back too far when you do eventually kick the bucket, and it makes actually seeing the end of the game more of an inevitability than an achievement. However, since you don't respawn exactly where you are, you do still have to actually try if you want to beat each stage. Speaking of the stages, there are 32 of them in total, with only about 4 of them ending in anything that can be classified as a boss fight, always against this massive plane that will constantly shoot huge amounts of bullets at you. The rest of the time, you're fighting against green and gray planes that will either shoot at you or intentionally try to ram into you. You'll also have larger planes that can take more punishment flying up from behind, and I guarantee you will lose a lot of lives just because you were rammed from the backside and not even realize it. Finally, there are these huge planes that will sway back and forth after appearing from the bottom of the screen and will pelt you with spread shots, making them the most dangerous, though thankfully the rarest enemies of the whole game. While the gameplay is simplistic and easy to grasp, and actually making headway into the game is easy because of its generous continue system, the game sure isn't much of a looker, or a sounder for that matter. The graphics convey what they need to, and they look okay, but there's not a lot of detail, and the background elements have the unfortunate distinction of making use of green and yellow when you aren't over an ocean. This is a bit of a problem considering that it can cause some of your enemies to blend in with the background elements, and even worse, can make some of their shots seem completely invisible. You do also have this loop-de-loop that lets you avoid incoming planes or fire, but you can't shoot while using it, and if there's anything occupying the normal flight path when the loop ends, well congrats, you avoided a frying pan and leaped straight into the fire, much like my marshmallow omelets. You wouldn't think those things could jump that far, but damned if they don't want to sit still while I'm trying to melt them. I will give this game some credit and say that it is kind of cool to see these backgrounds change as you continue to scroll, eventually changing to apparently a city below you, which is cool to see, though it does give some pretty bad implications considering what year this game is taking place in. What year is this again? Oh yeah, it's the name of the game. But its graphics are nothing compared to its soundtrack, which yes, it is technically bleeping out an actual tune, but the music in this game is one of the most grating things about it. Thankfully, you don't need sound cues in order to play, so you could just mute the game or play with it on a really low volume, but that doesn't change the fact that some games on the Atari 2600 had a more pleasant soundtrack. You also have a small collection of power-ups you can grab from red planes that will fly by every now and then, but because the power-ups aren't randomized, and it'll always be the same ones in the same places no matter how many times you play the game, and you also have to deal with long stretches of time between them, that does mean that you can't really count on getting a stronger shot, 1-ups, or a screen clear when you actually really need them. The game isn't bad, it's a perfectly competent shooter, but when your reward for actually making it to the end is to get a quick congratulations and then be shown the same game over screen you see every time you lose, this honestly gets drowned out by the absolute plethora of other shooters available on the system. So while it is a nice curiosity, the only reason I would say you would want to go back to this one, beyond said curiosity, is if you're not that good at shooters and want something to make you feel like you can play them well, and don't want something that is overtly complicated or requires you to think too hard beyond just getting to each new checkpoint. Now I wonder if there are any other games out there that is also named after a particular year that is also a shooter that massively changes up the formula while retaining the same shooter gameplay. Oh hi Capcom, what you got there?